Hello, hello. 1, 2, testing.
All right. Hey. Testing. Okay, we want to get started. To keep everything relatively on track, Dr. Chang. Hello. No, we can get started, right? We're not streaming anyway, so it doesn't matter. Not right now. Yeah, yeah. No, I know, Doctor. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Let's get this show on the road. Can I have everyone take their seats, please? Dr. German, right here, right here. We got you.
Thank you. I just leave my purse.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Everybody take their seats. Let's get started. All right. I just like to thank everybody for coming out here on a Saturday. This wasn't our initial intention. You could blame Hurricane Milton for this intimate affair we're about to have here. But this is the third time we're doing this. This is the third time our dean is going to speak at an AI in Medicine summit, or some incantation of the sort. My name is Dexter Hadley. I am faculty in the College of Medicine. I'm the chief of AI, and I like to coordinate a lot of the projects and the experiences you're about to see today. We want this to be interactive. We want this to be fun. There is a QR code that you should see right here. This is for our interactive poster competition. It takes you to a survey, and you pick the poster you like. You could vote as many times as you want. You could vote for all the surveys if you wanted to. And at the end, we'll have demos. We'll have some prizes, which are all books, probably. But all right, I'm going to introduce our Master of Ceremonies. This is Dr. Val Torres. He is from Tampa. He's a physician and an MBA, and he's going to be our Master of Ceremonies and sort of take us through the schedule you see on the screen there. So without further ado, I will let Dr. Val Torres take it from here. Thank you, Dr. Torres.
Thank you, Dr. Hadley. So, good afternoon. For some of you, this is the first time I'm meeting you. For others, it's been a while. Happy belated Hispanic Heritage Month. Thanks to Hurricane Milton. So, can we just give a round of applause for everyone in this room? Yes, it's never too late to celebrate. Now, I have the pleasure of being the MC and speaker today, and I want to introduce Dr. German. She is doing some amazing things. She is leading everything at UCF's College of Medicine, and she's doing a fantastic job. So please give a round of applause for her, the epitome of leadership.
Thank you. Well, I'm a little humbled to be here, but thank you all for being here. So welcome to the AI in Medicine Summit. I did make a few notes so that I could know what to say to you. But I want to say, if you're here today, you're an important part of the future of UCF, the future of healthcare technology. And I've been asked to welcome you. I've been asked to give a health campus update and to just say a few words about artificial intelligence. I'd like to start with our vision for UCF. And many of you know that our president, Dr. Cartwright, has stated that the future of UCF is that we will be Florida's premier engineering and technology university. I thought that might resonate with most of you. And some of you, maybe the ones who didn't clap, are maybe wondering, well, what does that mean for those of us who are in healthcare? Well, it means a lot. We are a young medical school, and I've got a couple of pictorial slides. Let's go to the next one. And just for you to see, the slide that looks like a desert is what Lake Nona looked like when I came here in late 2006 to build a medical school that would anchor a medical city that would one day be the global destination for research, patient care, and education. And I don't have to tell you, because everyone in this room knows that in order to get to that lofty vision, technology is going to be hardwired into everything we do. So When I say you are the future, I mean it. Well, what has happened? Well, our medical school served as a spark. The medical city is a dream, and that dream has sprouted. We've built more than just a medical school, and stay right there. This shows you the components of UCF's Academic Health Sciences Center. And what do we have? Well, we have a medical school. If you drive down the street one more block, you're going to see our half-built College of Nursing, which will open next fall. And our intent is to bring many, many more things here. We, of course, have our teaching hospital, our cancer center. We are affiliated with the VA. This VA is the busiest VA in the nation. It was selected as the site for the National Simulation Center that the VA chose to locate here. We beat Palo Alto. So think about what that means in terms of the way the world sees what we're doing here. And then, of course, the Nemours Children's Hospital, which is the department, the pediatric department of our medical school. So for those of you who aren't aware of what's going on in our medical city, just to show you. And when I first arrived here, the buzzword, and I was just talking with David Metcalf about it, was simulation. We've got the National Sim Center of the VA. We've incorporated simulation into the educational program of the medical school. Our partner, HCA, has their regional sim center here. But today, we have a new tool, a new buzzword, artificial intelligence. And we're not yet really sure how much it will affect everything that we do. But I'm very optimistic that it will be a useful tool and advance our research. We're already using it in our medical education programs, and we're using it in patient care. And just to give you a glimpse of some of the things that are already happening here, the teaching hospital, the UCF Lake Nona Medical Center that you see there, is an innovation hub. So we're partnered with HCA, which is a healthcare system that's across the nation. It's the largest healthcare system in the nation. And it has 200 hospitals, 2 of which have been designated as innovation hubs. Ours is one of the 2. Well, what does that mean? It's an alpha site for testing things that are useful in healthcare. And we were the first to use Google Glass and artificial intelligence to write notes for doctors practicing in the emergency room. We created a scheduling system for nurses in labor and delivery that is now in beta testing at larger hospitals. So just to give you a sense that things are happening here already. We just announced recently the first biophotonics lab that will be in our biomedical sciences building, bringing together the basic technology of photonics with the minds that look not only at cellular and molecular medicine, but at healthcare in general. These things are happening here. We just hired a leader in aerospace medicine, and we are building aerospace medicine programs that don't exist anywhere else in the country. And our infectious disease and pathogen surveillance program is coming out of the ground. We will soon have a center with that name. And to some of you, that may not sound very technology focused, but we are the busiest tourism center airport in the nation. So think about COVID. When the next pandemic, and I didn't say if, when the next pandemic occurs, it will first be detected in the place that is most traveled by the world, and that would be us. So this is the place where we need to have the nation's and perhaps the world's surveillance center. And that involves a lot of data. So I want to inspire all of you to be thinking about new and creative ways for us to become relevant there. All right, so those are just a few things. So let's imagine the future together. And I'm going to, I think I'll stand here. Thank you. Just let me show you what might be. All right, here's the cancer center. That's 3 blocks down the road. And I asked the team to fly a drone over so I could show you. Many of you have seen this. There's a new tower. This 80-bed hospital can become a 500-bed hospital for us to do all of the things we've been talking about. Our medical office building will grow. Here's the College of Medicine Education building, our biomedical sciences building, where the photonics lab is now located. College of Nursing will bring out College of Health Professions. And for those of you who know me, I still have dreams of a College of Dentistry, although others don't dream about it. And the rest will be future centers, and we own this land as well. So you're going to see future centers and institutes popping out here. And one additional feature, student housing, because it's getting very expensive to live here, and I want to take care of our students. What's currently? Yes, we're sitting right here in this building. So let's imagine the future together. The future sprouts from our dreams. And in my conversations with several of you already, I have seen some pretty extraordinary looks into the future. So I want to end simply by saying thank you for coming together. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Dream big.
Thank you so much, Dr. German. So guys, have you ever felt loved, cherished, appreciated, and inspired all at the same time? It's a first for me. Dr. German, she is amazing. And can you please give her a round of applause again? We appreciate you. You are the beating heart of Central Florida's healthcare ecosystem. Thank you so much. But yes, our next speaker, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Chang. I've heard about Dr. Chang. Very smart, very innovative. But you know what? I can't put words to a face. He is just amazing. He has done so much with the Sharon Disneyland Foundation. And he's really helping to push innovation forward with artificial intelligence. Let's hear from him what are his thoughts. Because, of course, he's the expert, not me. Make it make sense, Dr. Chang.
Thank you very much. It's always good to be back in Florida. I was in Miami for 5 years of my life. So it's good to be back. And I was actually going to brave the hurricane, as Dexter knows, to be here. And then I was told that don't make the trip. Save it for another time. So my heart goes out to you during the hurricane season. I remember living through several big ones when I was in Miami. So hope everyone's okay and healthy. I don't have too much time with you, but first of all, I want to thank Dexter for sharing the same vision to really bring AI into healthcare at all levels. So I'll make some comments, but I want to use, you have all the slides. I'm just going to use a few of the slides as a framework and level set, especially for the younger generation here, and then use the remaining time for a nice, friendly conversation with all of you, which I think is ideal for this size audience. So let's go ahead. So in case you want to read about AI in healthcare, I wrote a book called Intelligence-Based Medicine that is ideal for both the clinician and the data scientist starting in this space, including 100 commentaries by some of my closest colleagues and friends. So Interesting read. I'm working on the second edition this year. That will be out next year. So here's an astronaut looking at the planet from the International Space Station. Now, why is that relevant? Has anyone heard of the overview effect? You're in Florida, so you're more space conscious than most of the other states. Has anyone heard of the overview effect? I think, yes, David has. So it's the cognitive shift that you develop when you go into outer space and come back and look at the planet. It's not the same. Even astronauts that have been to just the International Space Station rather than the moon, as you know, where Artemis is going back to the moon next year, so it's quite exciting. But you feel a very profound cognitive shift, i.e., when you go out in outer space and you look at the planet, you have a very different sensation and philosophy even when you come back to the planet Earth. So when I say the overview effect, it's liberating yourself from the gravity of Earth and tradition. Not that tradition is not good or outdated, but sometimes it's no longer very relevant when we go into the future. So I encourage all of us to develop an opportunity to have this overview effect, i.e. go into another discipline that's very different than healthcare and experience that discipline and bring it back to healthcare, because we so badly need new innovative ways of doing everything that we do in healthcare. So try to experience the overview effect. By the way, how many astronauts have there been since the very first one? I don't have an extra book to give you, but because I gave it to Dexter for the medical school. But sometimes around this time, someone will ask, are we allowed to Google? Are we allowed to chat GPT? This is a talk on AI. So I'd be disappointed if not everyone is taking out their GPT and saying, what's the latest number of astronauts? And depending on how you prompt, the answer is going to be different. And depending on which large language model you prompt, the answer might also be different. None of them are perfect, by the way. Does anyone know? Because I don't have a book to give you, I'm just going to tell you the answer. It's 644 as of a few months ago, maybe even a month ago. How many clinicians can speak AI and know enough of the technical background of AI to be bilingual? As you may or may not know, most astronauts now are also engineers. They used to be pilots in the old days, but now almost 70, if not over 70%, are also engineers. That's why we're so optimistic about space travel, because I do think the future of healthcare has to ride on a cohort of clinicians with a data science, at least basic understanding, if not fully trained in that area, all right? So how many are clinicians here or clinicians to be? All right? And how many are more on the tech side? And how many are both? Okay, we have 2 or 3. So I speak, I have opportunity to speak from all over the world. I just got back from Italy and I was in China before that. I kind of know pretty much all the clinicians that have this data science background, and I think it's less than 644 from around the world. So if you think we have a little crisis going with this amazing resource called artificial intelligence, the crisis is not with the technology necessarily. It's the lack of people that can truly be the cohort that will guide the agenda into the next century. It's people that can speak both clinical medicine and AI. Lots of well-intentioned people on both sides, don't get me wrong. But to really effectively implement and for healthcare to adopt, I do think you need a certain number of people that can speak both languages and can relate to both domains. And we don't seem to have that right now. So this is a clarion call to, especially the younger generation, to be bilingual, to know engineering and or artificial intelligence, as well as medicine, so that you can combine the two. I think that perspective is geometric, not additive. You're going to come up with probably some of the best ideas in clinical medicine and how to use technology to help clinical medicine if you can speak both languages. Lots of people have good ideas, but the implementation and adoption in its final form, long-term, has to be driven by a cohort of people that can understand both worlds. And I'm hoping that at least one person from this talk will decide to be that person to be bilingual. I think we need 20 to 30,000 clinicians, data scientists in this country alone, and probably over 100,000 worldwide. So we're way short, but I have hope for the future for the next generation. Okay. So I'll get off my soapbox now. So if you think it's not possible to be a great clinician and a great data scientist, I'm going to refer you to my daughter's favorite baseball player, Shohei Ohtani, who is equally good, as you know, at batting and pitching, something that no one ever thought was possible. And be so good at both that he's just about the most valuable player. I think he did win MVP this year. So have a Shohei Ohtani mentality when you go into clinical medicine and data science, because it's actually easier to do both in those areas compared to batting and pitching, which is, has to rely on natural talent as well. And then, as you know, we're talking about the future. I'm so glad that you're focused on engineering here, because look at the Nobel Prizes in both chemistry and physics. Traditionally, very well-established research areas and academic centers are now going to non-academic researchers in AI. So it's changing the paradigm much faster than you had imagined it maybe even a few years ago. So AI is definitely here to stay. I would argue that maybe another year or two, the people that won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, which they won, I don't know if you know Demis Hassabis by name, but he won it for being able to use AI or deep learning for determining protein structure based just on genomic sequence. As you know, all the human proteins now have been figured out in a matter of a couple of years. I was a molecular biologist in my previous life. It would take months and years usually to figure out a protein structure. Now it's done in a matter of weeks and months, soon to be seconds and hours. We never ever thought that would be possible. So all of our expectations in the past has to be radically shifted now because it's so different now. It's exponentially faster. I would say another year or so, they could have won it for medicine, because all the vaccine designs, all the new drugs now are going to rely heavily on artificial intelligence. So we just went from the bicycle era to the Model T era in healthcare. Now, Henry Ford invented the car 30 years before it actually was adopted on the roads because of two main problems. You can probably guess what those were. One, no roads were good enough. So infrastructure, and you can relate this to AI and healthcare. We don't have a good infrastructure in terms of data and IT to fully adopt AI very efficiently. And those of us on the inside of healthcare really need to help people on the outside trying to have AI adopted faster and better. The second problem is education. When Henry Ford came out with the Model T, he quickly solved the assembly line problem, as you know, but underestimated the need to educate the public on how to drive. No one knew how to drive this piece of equipment. So that took 2 or 3 decades. I'm hoping desperately that meetings like this will speed up the education process and won't be 2 or 3 decades. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Be inspired by your past, but don't live in it, please. So why is this so important and so timely? We've been practicing evidence-based medicine for a long time, and it served us reasonably well, but this evidence-based medicine is quickly becoming more and more outdated and inadequate, in my humble opinion, to practice medicine. Medical knowledge is doubling how often now? Anyone want to guess? How fast is medical knowledge doubling? If you're a cardiologist or if you're an orthopedic surgeon, how fast is your field's medical knowledge doubling? 3 years? Any other guesses? I'm sorry? Depends on the bot you're checking. Well, partly, yes, because it's trained on the existing knowledge. 35 days. Is there any hope for any of your subspecialist friends or doctors keeping up with his or her field? It is no longer possible without some sort of assistance, right? So AI could be that assistance. I just saw patients yesterday, a full-day clinic, and I used my large language model probably about a dozen times just to look up things that either I don't remember or I haven't kept up to date on, especially outside of my field of pediatric cardiology. So it is, I can imagine that doctors will be practicing in the very near future without this kind of smart partner of AI next to you in the clinic. You can't always call your smart pediatrician friend about everything, right? So you have to rely on something that's a little bit more available and accessible, okay? So just quickly, someone asked me to put just a level set here, and we'll go to your questions. Can you put all of AI on one slide, including ChatGPT? So I did this for him. So artificial intelligence is this huge box. Yeah, feel free to take pictures. It's going to be in the second edition of the book. Machine learning is how computers can take data and be able to make predictions. Very different than your traditional statistics. Statistics is top-down. We set the rules, we put it onto data, we get results. Machine learning is the opposite, right? You take all the data, you find patterns, and you put it onto new data. So essentially, it's a prediction machine. Okay, our dean was talking about nurses scheduling. I was at an executive retreat just a couple of days ago. They were asking me, is it possible that our nurses no longer have to do the scheduling? It's been possible for a decade. Can you help the nurses not to have schedule? Yeah, of course. It's as Bill Gibson, the computer scientist, says, the future is already here, just not evenly distributed. So if you have no idea what's happening out there with other health systems already using machine learning to do scheduling for your nurses and for your OR, then you're already behind in a way because that's already been done for a decade almost, all right? Deep learning is the more sophisticated machine learning that uses something called neural networks, which is good for nonlinear problems and also for images. So when you see news about AI reading medical images, that's deep learning, and that's convolutional neural network. And then the exciting recent development of AI is in the generative AI area. So it's taking everything on the internet, creating something new for you. So it's great for summaries, great for answering questions, great for making up new data. Soon, well before the end of the decade, the medical students here will be able to say, I just rounded on a patient with diabetes. I want to see the pancreatic cell and end-stage diabetes. Can you just show me that? It'll be very accurate. Right now it's terrible, but it's trying to get better. So you no longer have to always go to a textbook to learn. Can you imagine real-time, real-world learning that's never ever happened before? You're going to be a much smarter doctor, much faster than the previous generations have been, right? You have instant access to any information you want. And then large language model is part of this revolution. GPT is a kind of large language model. A large language model is enabled by something called transformers. Not what you see in the movies, but this is AI architecture that is relatively new, like a decade or so, but it's extremely powerful. It's so powerful that it superseded our expectations, all right? There's a phenomenon called emergence, which is AI doing something a little bit creepy and more than you expected. I think there's a little bit of that going on now with these large language models. They're so knowledgeable or so able to answer your questions that people are a little bit intimidated, including those of us who've been working with AI for a long time. Next, please. So this is generative AI on one slide. Again, next. Okay, Dexter, next. So I've been showing this cartoon for over a decade, as a few of you know. You're not being replaced by a robot, you're being replaced by someone who understands robots. So if you substitute the word robots for AI, that's actually happening now. There are cardiology and radiology departments, and maybe Deborah can attest to this, that are making a special effort to look for graduates who have some AI background, because that is the future. I just finished a book on AI in cardiology. I was just totally stunned by what's happening in all the areas in cardiology using AI. I never expected it until I really looked into it and talked to authors and talked to researchers. So there's far more happening in a lot of subspecialties than you may realize because no one's publishing all of this. So for you to know. Okay. So right now, we're just finishing a decade of using machine and deep learning that I just described. It's what I call computational intelligence, dominated by machines. The clinicians have been sometimes literally sidelined when publications have come out. There have been publications on AI in healthcare, like on EKGs, that had no cardiologists in the author list. So fortunately, that's no longer happening. People do realize you have to get the clinicians involved. The second 2.0, AI 2.0, is where we are now. So it's generative AI and something else called foundation models. This is where humans and AI are starting to work closer together. What's coming up in the next decade is truly going to be very exciting because that's when clinicians are going to be back in as a really valuable partner. So for those of you who are clinicians who are saying to yourself, you know, I'm not trained in computer science, I don't like programming even, don't put yourself out of AI in healthcare because your asset as a clinician is actually the most valuable asset going forward. We don't need clinicians to program. We need clinicians to understand the art and science of medicine to be able to help the programmers in the future because we've kind of reached a peak in terms of using computational intelligence. And even the deep learning gurus say that. The next big jump is going to be the clinicians coming in and say, this is what I've experienced in my clinical experience, and we should do this and when this situation comes up. I.e., we're kind of creating shortcuts for the computers to be able to understand what we're saying and doing. Causality is still not a factor in AI and healthcare. It's all correlation. So causality has to come from human intelligence, in my humble opinion, in the future. Next. Okay, how can AI best help the medical education and clinical training? Actually, I will give it a B+. It's actually pretty good. So when you ask, how many people here use GPT-4o regularly now? Okay, wow, this is a technical sector here. So there are times I give a talk and it'll be like one hand going up and almost like very shyly going up. So that's great that you're using it very aggressively. It totally changes the learning trajectory. Next. So the nice thing is in the future, I'm hoping in medical education, have the privilege of teaching at 7 different health professional schools now. We can really drill down into what the students need to learn rather than everyone sitting in class and most of them pretty bored at trying to learn the same thing over and over again. All right, and then just make a couple of more slides and we'll go to your questions. So if you look at the 2 sectors that are relatively slowest to adopt artificial intelligence, one is healthcare, even though the US is clearly ahead in the world, so we should be proud of that. And then education. Having filled out 10 forms for my daughters recently when they went back to school, I realized that even things like filling out forms by hand and faxing are still the mode of communication among schools. So I would say healthcare and education are really pretty far behind in general. So when you combine both, you have a really big challenge, right? You have the challenge of 2 sectors that are relatively slow. All right? Maybe 1 or 2 more slides. So the medical students are telling us, based on the surveys, they're not particularly happy with the way education is, and we need to work on that. Up to 74% are at one time or another unhappy or dissatisfied with the experience. So shame on us if the era of AI, we can improve on that because we have all the tools now that can really make it much more interesting for the students. When I was in China giving this talk, I had warned them that it might be a little controversial. And that one of the deans immediately got up and said, our schools are, all the students are very happy. Almost 100% of the students are happy. I said, yes, I know, but this is for the other schools. Yeah. I'm glad I didn't get arrested from that comment. So this is what I've listed as the ways you can learn about AI in healthcare, and I'm going to publish this soon. If you keep going, Dexter. So this is the sector that's here, and you can see there's like a dozen ways you can learn about AI in healthcare. from courses, and I sponsor quite a few of those courses. There are books, there are just, there are master's programs now in AI and healthcare, and I'm designing probably one of the first doctor programs in AI and healthcare, so if you're interested, let me know. So these are really, really coming fast, which is great for timing. Again, the key takeaway here for the students is you don't need to be a programmer to get involved. We have plenty of programmers. Programming is becoming an automated task. Don't be thinking that you're not a programmer, so you can't be involved in AI and healthcare. Next, please. All right, so I think the traditional way that we've been studying in medical schools is memorize and study. Hopefully that will change by the end of the decade to critical thinking and learning. This is what we need the students to do, right, eventually. It's really hard to get away from the gravitational pull of how we've taught traditionally. So when I teach in the schools, I actually not just flip the classroom, but I give them problems to solve, and the students love it. You know, I encourage them to use GPT-4o. I hope I didn't say anything controversial here, but encourage them to use these tools because that's the future. And then for the professors and the teachers, rather than presenting and testing, maybe we should consider discussing and inspiring instead. All right? And then maybe, Dexter, you can just flip on to the couple of, towards the end. Yeah. So this is one of the schools I'm working with. We're combining the AI topics with their traditional curriculum in a fun way. We call it MedEd 2030. It's not just for the medical schools, but it's for all. Here's an example. I usually like case-based studying, teaching. So we teach cardiology and AI together. All right. Maybe we'll go to the very end, Dexter, where we'll have that's my avatar. I didn't make that, someone else made that. Okay. I like this cartoon, if you can just pause there. Do you have to use finger quotes every time you mention my artificial intelligence? You know, so I guess here in Florida, people didn't think it was funny. Okay. All right. And then I just want to show you, here's my contact information. I'm a big, big fan, as Dexter knows, of supporting anyone in healthcare that wants to learn about AI. Text me if you like. It's not a bother. Text me and say whatever you need to say and ask whatever question you want to ask. I get lots of texts from clinicians or medical students or AI startups. Just text me. I've been in this space for a long time, so I pretty much know almost everybody in this space. Next. All right, maybe can you go towards the end? That's it? No, very end. Can you go to that? If you're, okay, that is the end for that. Okay. All right, so I left plenty of time, or about 20 minutes for questions. Maybe Dexter can help me 15 minutes. Questions from the audience? Here's a microphone.
Any questions?
Yeah. I'm going to sit down.
So one of the big things around AI is you need a lot of data and you need good data. How do you get around the issue of acquiring data in the lockdown healthcare perspective we have today?
Great question. Actually, I think at the end of this talk is a slide deck that is a talk that I give called 10 Reasons Why AI Will Not Survive in Healthcare. And one of them is hospitals not willing to share data, raw data. So the good news is that we have technological workarounds now. We can use synthetic data. We can also use federated learning. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, is not sharing raw data, but you share the insights, the weights and the parameters from the algorithms. It's kind of like a clinician going from hospital to hospital. You don't memorize all the patient's data, but you do remember what you learned, right? So we're like, sometimes we need to relearn how humans learn to be able to use an AI technology to help us So we don't really need all the raw patient data, but we need to learn the insights and embed them into the algorithm. So the answer is hopefully between synthetic data and federated and swarm learning, that we will no longer always need a lot of patients' raw data. And that's relatively new information just in the last couple of years, but it's very, very exciting. Sort of technological workarounds of the traditional challenges. One of the things I like best about technology is if the humans are stubborn about solving a problem, technology usually will find a way around the humans to get the humans I call it getting the humans out of the way solution. So the good news is that I think there are good solutions in the future.
Wonderful talk, Dr. Chang. Thank
Yeah.
you. Quick question. So I'm a physician, and I'm trying to leverage these different large language model tools. Is there one that you utilize clinically to gather things? You know, right now I'm using consensus.ai. I'm using notebooklm.google, and those are how I'm going about aggregating some of the data and science on specific areas of clinical application. Do you have any other resources?
Yeah,
you use?
it's been a
Thank you.
Cambrian explosion of large language models. I think just biomedical ones are, I think, over 200 now. Not most, including one good one, the Gatortron, which is out of Florida. I use, again, this is not a personal sort of insistence on the large language models, but for day-to-day, I think GPT-4o is perfectly good. If you get the membership version of GPT-4o, you're nodding because you probably already figured it out. There's something called Preview 1.0. I don't know if you've seen that. That's like the precursor of 5.0, essentially. And it has a very powerful reasoning, quote unquote reasoning. It's not really reasoning, but it has a thinking capacity now. It gives you a much more elaborate, well thought out answer. It does take, not a long time, like 20, 30 seconds. So I occasionally will jump onto, depending on the question I'm asking, I'll jump from 4.0 to Preview 1.0. For medical, clinical stuff, I like to use a couple of different biomedical LLMs. I'm in a advisory role for one, so I won't mention that one. But the smaller ones are going to be consolidating, unfortunately, but they're quite good. But the biomedical LLMs are particularly good in the clinical setting, even though I think the 4.0 is getting quite good. Good enough that I can even survive on just 4.0 without the biomedical ones now. So again, this is not a personal advertisement for 4.0, but I think to me that's the one to beat. And I would encourage everyone to just try a few, and you will develop a personal relationship with one that you like best. And also it kind of gets to know you. I don't know if you notice, Val, that when you ask it enough questions, it seems to have enough of a memory about who you are that may be a little bit creepy, but it kind of gets to know you, which is good in a way. It knows how you like answers to be presented. It knows who you are and what you do, what level of answer you expect. So that's the kind of the emergence thing that I didn't expect. Because the way it uses context windows and everything, it's not supposed to have long-term memory, but it's acting like it kind of knows who I am. So, do a couple of questions in the front here.
Hi, my name is Maya. I have a question about in terms of who you believe should be a part of the story as well, in terms of clinicians and engineers. Is there a place for biomedical scientists in this space and academia? Does that count in the context of clinicians, or is it in between? And just one more, in terms of academia, how do we fight against one level of academia punishing students for using AI versus other levels of academia encouraging it?
Maybe Deborah left at a very timely moment. As I said, I teach at 7 different schools now. I encourage the use, with the school's permission, of creatively using any large language model. the one thing I ask is when they do get an answer for a thought-provoking question, I ask students to have a human commentary at the end of the large language model output, so that, and that has gotten the students excited about learning. You know, I noticed that they're now prompting all sorts of questions now, because once you liberate them from this sort of imposed sanction against LLMs, it seems like it just liberated their creativity and imagination to learn. So, but I'm in the tiny minority. I'm even advocating using LLMs. I'm an editor of a couple of journals, to use LLMs to review journals on the first pass, so that the reviewers don't have to spend a lot of time saying the same things over and over again. So upping the human game is, I think, a really productive way of using a large language model. But overall, I think the academia will come around, and I think realize that this is we need to change the definitions of a lot of the words that we're used to. Teaching, learning, thinking. I think we need to redefine these words, and maybe we'll feel better about, you know, in my mind, if someone is willing to learn and passionate about learning, there is no cheating per se. It's just, you know, us redefining perhaps how we've looked at these, you know, dimensions in the past. But I'm in a very small minority of teaching faculty that feels that way. I don't know how Dexter here feels, but I think it's the right time to start thinking about using AI in a more creative and productive way.
I have a different perspective on this. If you look at the data that is used in medicine, we teach social determinants of health now. That has almost nothing to do with medicine, and everything to do with structures in the system that doctors have to literally fight against. You can argue that AI can give you any kind of patient you'd like to simulate. We have a lot of simulation folks here. AI can fight the bias that we're supposed to be teaching our students. And you know, if you think about how the best clinician in the world works, you have no idea how the best pathologist picks a cancer diagnosis, but you believe them. At least with AI, you have a chance to figure out how these algorithms work and why that answer is explainable as a new buzzword. So you can ask both sides of that question. Of course, I can argue both sides of that question. I think AI is probably the only way to equalize the playing field, which is probably what the rest of this conversation is going to be about after the break.
Maya, I also just want to add that I believe everyone and anyone interested in this space should be involved, including ethicists, lawyers, you know, people from religion. I think it's going to bring out the best in us eventually to have all of these disciplines involved in what we call transdisciplinary collaboration. That's the new buzzword now. Not interdisciplinary, but transdisciplinary, so that every one party understands more than his or her own, you know, perspective. You understand everyone else's, or at least one other dimension as well. So I think it's going to bring out the best in us in that sense. In addition to monitoring and having surveillance for inequities in health. You know, humans oftentimes have unintentional bias, which is not good pattern recognizers sometimes. And I think hopefully AI will help that. Even in clinical research, it'll be able to say, you know, in this particular study, Asian Americans are vastly underrepresented. You need to have some synthetic data to make up that difference. Yes. Yeah. So I didn't show my really controversial slides. That almost got me arrested in Shenzhen, China. I'm a proponent, and again, I'm in a tiny minority, unless Dexter decides to join me in thinking that way. I'd like to do away with all examinations. I think they're draconian and they're outdated, and it doesn't inspire our students to learn. I'd rather that they use the Duolingo philosophy of accumulating points and self-motivated and prove that they are competent in areas rather than testing. So even though I teach board review courses, I'm no longer teaching those because I'm not agreeing with that philosophy of testing professionals periodically instead of inspiring them to learn. So again, hopefully by the end of the decade, we'll have a few schools that actually will do away with testing as a concept and trying to gamify the learning so that you accumulate points to stay certified rather than getting tested. Very few health professionals actually like being tested, but they like learning. I think it's different. I think I learn a lot from watching my kids learn, and they're positively influenced by something like Duolingo. One of them has gone almost a whole year without an interruption. And when was the last time you see a student say they can't stop learning for a whole year, every single day, and they respond to the testing deadlines, but they don't necessarily learn every day. But the inspiration can still be there. We just need to, I think, encourage that rather than, I think, stymie that with testing. But that's very controversial, obviously. But I hear more and more students would really prefer to be in a cohort where they're never tested, but they are sort of be in a system where you actually keep track of how much they're learning in a different way. Yes.
Stepping away from the education aspect and going a little bit towards medicine purely, for some patients with cancer, especially if they're in hard-to-reach areas like the biliary tract, it's a little difficult for the gastroenterologist or the surgeon to take a sample for pathological testing. So, how can AI be used to improve the accuracy of diagnoses when the biopsy sample is taken from an area that's sort of on the edge of a necrosis site surrounding a cancer lesion?
Are you a medical student by any chance?
No, I'm pre-med, but I have a family member who had ampullary cancer, which is really rare. But the initial biopsy wasn't done properly, so we had to delay the diagnosis by a while.
So there's a very important personal basis for your question. So the good news is that the future is already here. That there are quite a few centers that are already using real-time deep learning to determine the likelihood of tissue that is pathologically diseased. So that's already being done. As a matter of fact, gastroenterology was relatively quiet for a long time in terms of adoption of AI, behind radiology, cardiology, ICU, and ER, until a few gastroenterologists, to their credit, realized that why not use AI to interpret the images that we're seeing during the endoscopy or colonoscopy in real time, and then rather than taking an unnecessary biopsy sample and maybe leading to a complication. So that's being widely now adopted in different hospitals I'm seeing. So the other thing about these practices, like gastroenterologists using deep learning in real-time fashion to determine whether or not a sample needs to be biopsied, as well as radiologists now having access to AI tools that can determine whether or not an MRI of the brain has a bleed or not within seconds, is that you see that we're changing the standard of care. Like it or not, we are. So in radiology, for example, a hospital is being sued now for not using an AI tool, because we always talk about the ethics and the legality of using AI, but we almost never talk about the opposite. And we need to learn to be symmetric. So right now, hospitals being sued for not using an AI tool, and there was a negative outcome from a bleed. So and soon I think that will happen in gastroenterology as well.
I'd like to comment on that. So the FDA has a list of 100 and whatever FDA FDA-approved interventions. FDA-approved interventions. Or whatever. But there's some list continually growing. This is technology that continually gets better. At what point is it standard of care to use AI, and you will be sued if you don't use AI? It seems like inevitable if you think it to a logical conclusion.
I think that day is already here. I won quite a few dinners because I was betting that you would be sued for not using AI before you get sued for using AI on a theoretical basis, because it's very hard to prove that a patient was harmed by an algorithm simply because the physician always has the final say. It's easier to prove that a patient was harmed because you didn't use an existing tool to make a diagnosis. In this case, it was a brain bleed where a hospital is being sued now. So I just think theoretically it was easier, and it turned out to be true now that a hospital is being sued. So I think the standard of care is going to be rapidly shifting, probably faster than we're comfortable with, because in the US, more than most countries that I'm aware of, we're really, the medical legal aspects is a really, dominating dimension of the practice of medicine, like it or not. It just is. But I don't think it's terrible that we have a stick also in addition to the carrot to encourage the adoption of appropriate AI tools that are more mature than a decade ago. So, but the gastroenterology is a good example where it is actually quite helpful for the gastroenterologist to be able to use AI for the procedures.
I mean, I could also argue the contrary, right? So something like 6 out of 10 pathologists disagree what melanoma is under the microscope, and take your pick. Like, this is always the rule, hardly the exception. So I think AI can become a ruler. I mean, we have rulers. A foot probably wasn't a foot before we actually had a ruler to measure it. So AI can become a reference standard, in other words, for this rater unreliability that exists, at least in pathology.
And that's not because our pathologists are not good. It's just that, any single pathologist, let's say looking at melanoma, at most probably see 100,000 examples, whereas AI can see hundreds of millions. So it's a volume issue in terms of better accuracy in predicting. It's not because the pathologists are not competent. It's just a sheer volume of experience. Fantastic questions from Florida. From our there's one more question there. Yeah.
There we are. 1,000 use cases being built all over the world, a lot of things. If you come down to a common issue or problem that you think needs to be addressed fundamentally to advance this, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you would talk about that would solve this problem, really advance it, and make a difference? I'll lead the witness with the phrase data.
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your comment?
Leading you with the phrase data, quality data.
Quality of data. Okay. I think in the US, since we're spending $4.4 trillion on healthcare, probably 30+% is bureaucracy and administration. I think, to me, that's the easiest win in terms of getting return on the investment, is to shave down the inefficiencies in healthcare. So I think that will impact on quality of care, because so much of quality of care is now hampered by the inefficiencies within the health system.
Power the AI engine.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you because of the fan in the background.
What do you see to power those AI engines, staying focused in that area, not holistically at the problems in the American healthcare system, but what are the things that need to be addressed so that these AI engines that can deliver insights and decisions, what are the key factors there that you think need to be addressed?
Okay, I think the most important thing is healthcare stakeholders are still not good at looking at data as a really good resource for AI. And just to give you an example, I'm recently tasked with a very difficult project at my own hospital, which is looking at mental health and the likelihood of suicide in adolescents. very difficult from an AI perspective, but made much more difficult when we look into the data. It's collected differently by different people. It's defined differently. It's sequestered in many different areas. In so many places, now I don't no longer call it data islands. I call it a data archipelago because there's so many little places where people keep data. So I think I know it sounds ridiculously fundamental, but we need to understand data and databases much better because the AI has to sit on this foundation of data and information. If the data and information are very unstructured and unstable, the AI projects will really suffer from that. But overall, I think it's the North Star we need to get our act together about data and databases. So I would focus on data and databases primarily.
I could probably add to that. I think as physicians, if you think about it, my kids spend more time on their devices probably interacting with me. Yet, name one killer app for health in the App Store. We can name plenty killer apps, but not many for health. So I feel like as physicians, we have honestly failed our patients in the digital age. There's really nothing hot, no Angry Birds, no Pokemon. There's nothing like that in health. And Apple's a $1 trillion company. Apple Watch, yeah, it's fantastic. That's a piece of hardware. So I feel like as physicians, we really have, if you think about it, you go to medical school, you make a lot of money. It's probably the only field that Google can't, recruit you because you already make a lot of money. So it sets up a dichotomy in medicine that I really would like to bridge with the 640 odd individuals you think that are trained in both. So I think it's a culture. I think we have to teach it in medical school for it to make an impact. And most of the places I've been, like Stanford and UCSF and these awesome places, there's a whole institute devoid from the medical school. There's no med students in said institute. And I think at a place like UCF, that can change because we're brand new and figuring it out.
I think that's exactly right. When I was in school at Stanford, I had the privilege of talking to the doctors that were recruited by Google to work with them. They're either fresh grads or actually some never even graduated from medical school, so not a day of practice, or they're very senior physician executives who also no longer see patients. I think we need physicians on the ground, and it sounds like you're in agreement, to really work with these companies, not medical students who imagine what it would be like to help with practice of healthcare, and not physician executives who no longer practice. So that's why I maintain my practice, because I feel like I need to be one of the few clinicians that are in the AI space who actually still practice medicine. But I don't think there will be a killer app. But I do think there will be a lunar landing moment, which is, I think a decade or two from now, we no longer will be talking about AI in healthcare. It's because it's very pervasive and we're using it in hundreds of different ways. So that's our big moment. There won't be a killer app. I think mainly because healthcare is just far more complex than other things in engineering or whatever that has a killer app. It's just far more complex, much more heterogeneity in terms of our patients, many multi-system disease situations. It's just, it's near a chaotic state. It's so complex. And I just think there can't, from a data science perspective, it's just not easy to have a killer app when you have complex situations that change all the time. So it's not to discourage us from doing it. I'm just saying it's going to come in a slower, more methodical, progressive way rather than one disruptive app that's going to take care of everything. It hurts me to say it, but it's true.
Okay, so you were just talking about what the future of medicine could look like, but you also mentioned just a little bit ago appropriate tools. For the people that are innovating in this room, what does a collection of appropriate tools look like? How can they envision building that future towards what you're talking about?
Well, especially in the last year, there's a lot of literature and statements about regulation, and including in healthcare. It's ironic to me that people that talk a game about regulation in healthcare don't know a thing about data science usually, and how hard it is, and who's going to do it, how you're going to set that up, what's the framework, how often. It's never, the details are never discussed. So I'm one to say that we need to find that sweet spot in reference to your question between regulation to make sure everyone is abiding by some basic principles without stymieing innovation, which is what we badly need in AI in healthcare. So that's a very small sweet spot that hopefully some of us will have a say in that and not have a governmental agency say you can't do any of this, and that's going to really be a big impact on curbing innovation that we need in healthcare. I'm cautiously optimistic that AI in healthcare will get there. It's a trajectory that will be decided by the humans, unfortunately, not by AI. I wish AI had a say, because it'll be a little bit less emotional. Maybe the last question? Okay.
All right. I have two questions. Sorry. My first
Only humans would do that. AI would not do that.
My first question is in regards to AI when it comes to biases, especially when it comes to race. I've read a few papers the other day about there are still some biases when it comes to race in AI. So how do we mend that as we implement AI into medicine, and as we already know that there's a lot of biases within medicine? How do we make sure that AI doesn't propagate that bias? That's my first question. My second question is about from people that I spoke to, they fear AI because of the movie I, Robot. So as we integrate AI into medicine in our daily lives, how do we make sure that we create a kill switch? That way, if the AI goes rogue, we have a kill switch to take care of that.
Great question. Okay, so the bias question, a lot of biases were actually unintentional and were human derived. So we need to use AI as a partner to really have a surveillance tool that will pick up biases, and hopefully the AI will keep us even more honest and self-reflective about biases. So I'm very optimistic about that. Now, you mentioned the movie I, Robot, and for those of you who've seen it, you probably know what my favorite line in that movie was when Will Smith said to the robot, arguing about why humans are still better and unique. He said, can you write a symphony as good as Mozart? Can you write a play like Shakespeare? And then the robot, I love this line, the robot, without missing a beat, said back to Will Smith, can you? And Will Smith just looked dumbfounded, So we have to be really fair to our AI, partners. AI was, after all, created by us. It's human-derived computer intelligence. It's not really artificial. So we have to be a little bit fair about what we expect and how we can allow it to help us without endangering us, right? So there's definitely a certain percentage of people, even in the AI world, thinking this is going to lead to a doomsday scenario. But I'm very optimistic that it's actually going to do the opposite. That's going to really bring us into a Renaissance period in which it's going to bring out the best in humans, including justice and equity. Because I think one of the best things about AI, and even for myself personally, really had to examine my own practice and how we do things, because it's relatively objective. So you have to really set your emotions and your biases down yourself before you allow AI to help you in a big way. So I'm one of those people that is going to remain cautiously optimistic that this is going to help us. And when Jesse Ehrenfeld, my good friend who's the president of the AMA, asked me at an AMA meeting, what keeps me up at night since I'm in AI every day, it's not using it enough. It's not sort of worrying about the robot running away with everything, the kill switch situation. I'm worrying that we're not using it enough to help us right now.
Hi.
Hi.
Congratulations on your presentation, Dr. Chang. My question is a little bit on the side from technology. There's no doubt how technology impacts medicine and healthcare, and how AI is here to support and be a positive tool. But another area that impacts medicine and healthcare is the emotions. And we have now artificial emotion, or what's called emotion AI. How far do you think we are from having the emotional part of the artificial intelligence really impacting the exercise of medicine and healthcare?
I think we're already there. I think depending on what kind of tool you use, some of the chatbots by the patient's evaluation are actually thought to be more empathetic, more patient, and more understanding, believe it or not, than humans. Because we're stressed by time, and the chatbots are not necessarily have that time pressure that clinicians have in the real world. I think it allows us to really say, do we need to get better at what we do? I think it's, again, a self-reflection, you know. I think I was surprised by the result of that survey, that the patients felt like they'd rather deal with a chatbot because, again, they were just superior, including not as judgmental, which I guess is more of a human trait right now. But I argue the opposite. Let's take that survey and allow humans to come back and be better. And if those of you who are familiar with the Go tournament, when the AlphaGo software defeated a human champion, they kind of learned from each other. You know, took what they did better and learned it for themselves, both the computer and the human champion. So I'm looking forward to that in the future, where there's a synergy between the computer and myself as a clinician to learn from each other and how to get better on both sides, not just the human side, but the AI side as well. Now, you look like maybe I didn't fully answer your question. But there's definitely a big EQ component now in AI, that's for sure. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to be, this is my keynote for my meeting coming up that you're invited to. I'm going to actually talk about what it means to be a human healthcare worker in the era of AI. And we still do many things that AI cannot do, including wisdom, in some cases compassion, not always, creativity, imagination. I mean, it's not a short list. But AI is catching up in all of those areas too. So,
with that, I would love to thank Dr. Chang. This was an awesome presentation. Thank the audience. I have a gift from UCF and Dean German. Pleasure. And he's here for a big AI conference that is actually paid for. The AI Med conference in Carib Royale. If anybody is interested in going to this conference, Dr. Chang has agreed to comp the ticket. So send me an email quick, and we will figure that out. No, just make sure we coordinate, and it starts tomorrow, right? So whoever emailed Dr. at ucf.edu, and we will get hopefully get you on that list, or I'll send you his number. Pleasure. Yeah, I apologize for the change in schedule. Dr. Chang had an emergency. 5-minute break, and we'll come back with the fun part of this show.